gonna serve somebody in a booth or on the street. You're gonna serve somebody. Every vote, every voice, every tweet might be the law, the dollar, or the folks who can't speak loud. You're gonna serve somebody. So say who you're serving now.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Serve Somebody with Steve and Emily podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm your host, Steve Bradshaw. And as always, I'm joined by my good friend and co-host, Emily Hallavy. Emily, how are you doing today?
Steve, I'm doing great today.
Tell me what's on your mind.
I am very excited about our guest today. For you Kurt Vonnegut fans, he coined this phrase, a karass, and those are the people that you see kind of in your daily life, your circle. You may or may not know them, but you end up crossing paths all the time. And our guest today, we have the kids the same age, and so I end up seeing her, whether we're dropping our kids off at camp or at the baseball field, and so it's going to be really fun to dig into some politics other than the normal, baseball drama on the field.
Okay, awesome.
But I have been holding off on asking you this burning question that I have. I know last week you went to watch the Democratic Candidates Forum for Governor.
I did.
I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Did you go in with any expectations or a favorite?
No, I didn't. My mind was open, but I'm glad you asked. So I'll make a couple points about that at the outset. Number one, it was very well attended. Okay, the auditorium was full. I was very happy to see that. Number two, I think the atmosphere in the room was very positive. No outbursts, no craziness. And I think all 7 of the candidates did fine. Okay, so there's that. Now, I do have some biases with regard to that. As you know, I've gone through a number of those kinds of forums myself. It's not my favorite format. I happen to think it's a contrived format. So what it really amounts to is a 7-way press conference. And when you're given 60 seconds or 90 seconds to answer a question, it's kind of tailor-made for sound bites and going for an applause line. And, the issues we face are complicated. And I think they take more than 90 seconds to explain. But I get that. It is what it is in terms of that construct. Also, you asked me if I had any favorites. I really didn't. But most people who show up do.
Yeah.
They already know who they're supporting. They're not there to be convinced. They're there more as cheerleaders for their candidate. So, but that's how it is. My preference is for the long form. Where people have a chance to fully articulate a response, and it's good if to find out if a candidate has thought through their policy proposals, have thought through the ramifications of what they're proposing. And that's why we created this forum, where we can have long-form conversations with decision makers and leaders. And it's great that we have that opportunity. I will say, for the sake of our audience, that we have afforded every single candidate running for governor, both Democrat and Republican, the opportunity to come in here and sit with us in a long-form format. So we're starting to get a few trickles on people responding, so I'm excited about that. We'll see who actually commits, but that opportunity has been made available to them. So bottom line is, I enjoyed the forum. I'm glad I went.
Your mind wasn't changed?
My mind wasn't changed one way or the other. As I said, all 7 candidates did fine. I got to interface with each of them for a couple minutes afterwards. I stuck around to the end and shook hands and looked them in the eye and extended a personal invitation to join us in addition to the email invitation I'd sent previously. They all seemed receptive at the time. We'll see if that holds up, but I'm excited about it. But again, I'm glad I went. And I will be attending a similar such forum for the Republican candidates pretty soon.
Should be interesting.
So I'm looking forward to that.
Sure
Thank you so much for asking. So today, as Emily alluded to earlier, we are very honored to have as our guest State Senator Elena Parent, who represents Senate District 44 in the Georgia General Assembly. Thank you, Senator Parent, for being here with us today. We're so honored. as we start, is there anything you'd like to share with us?
Well, first of all, my gratitude for having me on. Sorry, scheduling was more difficult than I would have wanted, and appreciate all of your patience with me.
Well, you're in the
as
middle of
we-
session,
right?
so it's fine.
Yeah, we cope with changing schedules frequently during the session, and things are always getting sprung on us. So appreciate your forbearance in that, and thrilled to be here.
Not a problem. So as we start, in the interest of full disclosure, Senator Parent is a friend of mine. During my tenure in office, I sought to establish and maintain open lines of communication with all of the members of our county's legislative delegation. But of course, there are some folks that you naturally gravitate toward, and Senator Parent has been one of those folks for me. And I think it's because we share a similar temperament and a similar approach to governing. In the General Assembly, Senator Parent has been a fighter and a champion for the right causes and for the right reasons, and she's a leader who knows how to build coalitions to get things done. And of course, I will never forget her open and steadfast support of my various campaigns, especially my most recent campaign in 2024. She certainly didn't have to do that, but she did. And for this, I will always be grateful. Now, this does not mean we're going to take it easy on her, but it is important to me that our audience knows exactly where I'm coming from. So, Senator Parent, thanks again. Let's start with this. So we understand that this is your 12th legislative session
In the Senate.
in the Senate. Your
Yeah.
12th session in the Senate. Wow.
So I did 1 term in the House, so 2 years.
Okay. So we'll get into some specific legislation shortly. But as we start, for now, since we're in the throes of a legislative session, just give us an overview of the tenor and tone of how the session's going so far.
Yeah. So, Steve and Emily, it has been a unusual session per the way things have gone in the state Senate of late. And when I say of late, I feel like the current era and tone of the Senate kind of began when Burt Jones became lieutenant governor, and some of his sort of compadres, right, in that Senate Republican caucus also kind of got elevated to higher level positions with his victory in the lieutenant governor's race. So this year is noticeably different than the past 3. And I think several things are going on there. The elections in the fall, both I would say are Public Service Commission elections here in Georgia, as well as the New Jersey and Virginia gubernatorial elections, spooked some of my Republican colleagues in the sense of, oh wait, people really are worried about affordability and cost of living, and now we've got, you know, a Republican administration, so it's not going to work to just say, oh, this is all the fault of President Biden and VP Harris anymore, right? So they've been wanting to advance more legislation that they would term as, you know, helping folks with affordability. However, what they filled a lot of our time with over the last 3 years were actually a lot of culture war bills that don't cost anything in the budget and are sort of helpful with riling up the base or helping someone in their primary. And of course, that's always easier to do, to come up with these topics when your party's out of power in Washington, right? You know, everything under the sun that they could throw at us, especially, you know, library books, LGBT issues, so book banning, anything that remotely that they would have considered woke, of course, immigrants, guns, you know, just you name it. It really got quite tiresome. So apparently the idea was we are really going to move forward on what the people really actually want us to do, which is focus on making their lives better, which again is not really something that we had spent that much time on. However, the agenda on that is very short because they also don't want to actually like really spend much money, right? So then you're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. It's like if it has a budgetary impact, which some affordability things would,
Sure.
Yeah.
then we're kind of not touching that, right? Or, you know, so it's made for a later session on the floor, a later session with with culture war bills so far. That could all change on a dime, especially once we get to post-crossover. And it's also led to these competing proposals out of the Senate and House Republicans to, in the Senate, eliminate or take big steps towards eliminating the state income tax. In the House, eliminate the property tax.
Understood.
So,
All right. Well, thanks for that overview.
So tell us about your district.
so the district I represent goes from Morningside to Morrow, and until last year, my district was only DeKalb based, which selfishly I really loved, and was much more of like an oval shape. I was actually the only senator in the DeKalb delegation. At that point, there were 7 of us who only had DeKalb. Everyone else had parts of at least one other county, so I was sort of spoiled. But with a court ruling, the districts got redrawn, and 2 districts really sort of, well, more than 2 got churned up, but 2 were sort of like a key focus of trying to meet the court's order. One was then Senator Jason Estevez's, and one was the one I represent. So the district got a lot more long and skinny. And now, instead of kind of picking up, before it had, Decatur, Avondale, went all the way to the southern parts of Brookhaven, went south of Decatur through Midway Woods, Belvedere Park, kind of went down to East Lake Golf Course. It was a nice little kind of oval. Now it's, much thinner and starts in Morningside and goes all the way down to Morrow in Clayton County.
Yeah. So is there a Clayton County caucus?
Yeah, we have a delegation as well, and so once it was that there were only 2 senators in the Clayton County delegation, and then now there are 3 because I joined the delegation.
So that's a little easier than DeKalb.
Yes, it's a much smaller county, about half or less than the population size, but has all the same things that we have to grapple with in DeKalb as well. Some of the issues are a little bit different, but that has been neat getting to know and help new communities, I will say. As much as now that I have a district that does stretch on for so much, longer mileage-wise, which many people have already had. They're drawn that way on purpose, and they're really not easy to represent. The last district, Emily, where our boys play baseball, was in the district.
Yeah.
Where my kids went to the orthodontist was in the district, and I could give other examples. Things that I intersected with in my everyday life were in the district, though a lot of those got taken out.
Yeah.
And the reality is that there isn't that much overlap, not just with like where I live in DeKalb, but even like, DeKalb and Clayton, period. There's not as much intersection and overlap. And that just makes it where I feel like, and a lot of senators are in this position, and the reality is it's the constituents that get hurt.
Yeah.
Because everyone is going to have sort of like the political base they need, and these are supposed to be part-time jobs. They don't pay a lot.
Yeah.
So it's 45 minutes down to Clayton.
Yep.
I'm not able to be there as much as I would like. I'm doing, I think, a good job for them. But in terms of really being present, that is much more difficult.
Yeah.
And Senator Kim Jackson, she got a number of my precincts, and she said the other day there's nothing, no connection between like where she is in Stone Mountain where she lives and her whole district and the precinct she picked up for me, and I was like, right, and that's where my kids play baseball, and so it's not great for the constituents, but it's an honor to serve regardless, and I am happy to get to help out Clayton County.
Well, that gerrymandering is an entirely different
yeah, we could
subject.
talk for 3 hours on that, couldn't we, Steve?
So you alluded to some of the tax cut proposals that
Right.
are put forth by some of your Republican colleagues. Where do you come down on that? What do you think of those proposals? What's driving them? What's going on with that?
Right. So I think my Republican colleagues, their sort of preferred political answer to affordability is cutting taxes, right? But the proposals that have been put forward are irresponsible because they actually could not come to fruition because the amount of the hole they would blow in the budget is like, way bigger than Stone Mountain. And so if you actually tried to do that and cut all those services, you're talking about things like closing down the university system. I mean, these things are not going to happen, and there isn't enough. Yeah. People don't really, people of course always want to think, oh, there's all this waste and fraud and fluff in the budget. I mean, that really is not true. As to the Georgia budget, we're actually already a pretty low tax state. I think we're 42nd in taxes. What other states that do not have an income tax do is they have a much broader and higher sales tax. And so I opposed the Senate's proposal because when that is what you would have to do, it means that middle income folks end up paying more.
Absolutely.
And it will not be a tax cut for the broad populace. It will end up being a tax cut for the people that make a lot more money. And that's why an income tax is more fair. And it is upsetting that the folks in the Republican caucus who are running for higher office, governor or lieutenant governor, are not leveling with the public, because the reality is that may give short-term political advantage. But when it's totally pie in the sky and can never get done, all it does is you're misleading your voters. It makes them angry, and it makes it much harder to govern in a responsible way.
Understood.
Yeah, when I think about the education system alone and cutting income tax or property taxes is also being floated, it makes me think, well, okay, so then the first place to get hit is our education system and the quality of our education system. And most working families can't afford private school to give our kids a good education. So that's not a price break for us.
Right.
That's $20,000 a year.
That's right. Yes. So 75% of the budget, to your point, Emily, is education and healthcare.
Yeah.
Transportation's another 8. Corrections are like another 8. Once you get down to where, and I've tried to say to some folks that say, hey, cut the budget. I'm like, well, really what you're ending up talking about is like 4% of the budget. And I bet if you dug into that, you would find that you would not actually want to cut all of that 4%.
Yeah, absolutely. So understand that Georgia has a pretty big surplus right now.
We do.
So, I mean, in the billions. I think it's 14,
Yes, I think,
15 billion.
let's go with 14.
Okay, we'll go with 14.
Yeah.
So if you had it within your power, how would you allocate that surplus?
So I actually do have something that I think would be transformational, which is creating a early childhood education and child care trust fund. So if you took, and some other states have done this, I think in Mexico and a few others. So if we took like $4 billion of that money and put it into a self-sustaining fund and only spent what the returns kick off, right? Which is, of course, how we do our teacher retirement system and other systems that we manage for retirees through the state. It would be transformational for not just kids, but also working parents.
Yeah.
Because the economics of childcare are not good, and they don't really work in a free market for reasons I can. It's essentially that the average family can't pay enough to provide even a living wage for the people to do the job. So like the free market isn't really working well, and that is the case all over the country. So I do think that would be really transformational for families, for the economy.
Interesting.
And I was always sort of very suspicious of / against the enormous surplus build up, because the only way you get that is, let me back up. We do need to have a certain amount, I think it's like $2.5 billion, although it's a percentage, that we are statutorily required to keep in reserves. So leaving that aside, the undesignated surplus is what we're talking about. And it only got built up to this amount that Georgia's never before had, because the revenue estimates set through the administration, through Governor Kemp's administration, routinely underestimated over all these years how much tax revenue we would get, which means that money's building up in the surplus, and the legislature can't appropriate above the amount of revenue estimate that has been set by the governor.
Interesting.
Yes, and that's very important for people to know as they think about who's going to be the next governor.
That's right.
Right? So I was always sort of against it, because the way I see things, we have a lot of really important uses for a decent amount of that money, right? That I think would make Georgia more competitive.
Yeah.
And a higher quality of life state, right? But I will say that one of the benefits of building up this big surplus is that you could do something transformational. Now, the governor has done very little of what I would recommended, very little of something I would call transformational, kind of like what I'm saying about this early child care trust fund idea. But he this year is doing some work on needs-based higher ed, and he's doing some big transportation projects. We probably need those transportation projects, honestly.
Yeah.
But other, and I could name more things. I don't want to be unfair to him, but a lot of what he has done has been sort of tax rebates, which are very smart politically, but don't, because you could just not collect it in the first place.
Right.
Getting back to our, right.
Exactly.
So it's a smart political move. And then he's also, hadn't done it since Trump became president, but when gas prices were high under the Biden administration, here and there, he would make a big show of suspending the gas tax.
Yeah.
Which is how we fund transportation, roads and bridges. So then he would backfill it because we need the money from the surplus.
Oh, interesting.
Right. So to me, neither of those are good uses of the surplus.
Right.
The rebate or the gas tax. I concede that they are smart politics.
Understood.
Yeah. Well, the $1.99 a gallon gas that Trump talked about last night would be really nice to have right now. I don't know where that exists.
He says a lot of things.
Yeah. Okay. So I know some of us have been talking about affordability for many years now, particularly around housing affordability. What does that term mean to you, and what are you seeing in the session that might actually impact positively families across the state?
Yeah, so as it kind of ties quickly into this game of chicken in property tax and income tax relief. The House is sort of focused on property tax, and so that's one of their ways of talking about let's try to make housing more affordable. And some other small things have been done, but by and large, we have not done anything particularly big to tackle housing affordability. One of the issues, of course, is that, as you know very well, the local governments have a lot of sway here. And some bills that have sought to do that were, quickly thrown in the dustbin when all the, Georgia Municipal Association and the Association of County Commissioners show up and they want to fight anything that impedes on their local control. There are bills right now that would provide a carrot in the form of essentially a smoother path towards certain kinds of state financing for local governments that streamline some of their various requirements and do certain things in the housing space, streamlining some building, looking at allowing smaller lot sizes, accessory dwelling units, and some other things, right? But that hasn't, even though that's a carrot, not a stick, it hadn't gone that far. And it's one of those really difficult problems because the reality is that for everyone that lives right there in whatever community we're talking about, they move there because they like it. And a lot of people don't really want it to change. And then they're nervous, and change can be anxiety producing too. You're not sure what will happen with your house value, your kid's school, you know it well.
I've
but
seen
then
that
the
movie.
problem is every community's like that.
Yeah,
So you
absolutely.
can never build the stuff if every community's like that. And so that is where it would kind of make more sense for the state to just take the heat and be like, sorry, this is what, because we know you can't solve that problem. The local politics don't allow you to solve that problem. So it still hasn't happened for us either, but it would seem to me that it would in many ways make more sense for, of course it depends what it looks like.
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah, but so that's
there's
one of the
probably
things
an
out
argument
there.
to be made either way.
There is.
I certainly come at it from having
There
served
is.
in local government.
Yep.
But we won't. You and I won't resolve that right now.
Yeah, but it's a difficult problem.
It is very much so.
And even friends of mine, very good friends in Atlanta, when Amir Faruqi, when he was on city council, floated doing some denser development around some of the MARTA stations, which that makes sense.
Hello,
that makes sense.
We know about that.
know about
don't
that.
we?
Yeah, but you guys would know about that, over here in this neck of the woods in Avondale. But yeah, Candler Park, East, all the other communities right there. all went bananas. And I'm like, you people claim to be progressive.
Yeah.
So it just shows. It's real, emotional, and personal. And I get that, but I also get we need to have more housing, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, so we want to go into a few pieces of legislation that you've supported and sponsored. Try not to get too deep in the weeds for our audience.
Right.
But,
I know. You're going to, that is hard for me, Steve.
But
you and I are
understand.
both, let's understand the issue, people.
Absolutely.
I'll try my best.
But it's important for people to understand there's a sausage-making process and what goes on behind some of these bills. So we'll just deal with a few of them if you're okay with that, Senator. Let's start with Senate Bill 459, which provides for support for early literacy. So what was the intent?
Yes.
And what's the status?
So that bill is a next step in some ongoing efforts at the state level to put into place a sort of science of reading curriculum for Georgia's school kids, which is another thing that's been sort of sweeping the nation. And we don't have time to go into the backstory of why America's reading curriculum broadly kind of got off on the wrong path, but there is a podcast called Sold a Story if folks are interested. That's very interesting. Once folks figured out, okay, you got to teach phonics, that's when we also started to try to move the curriculum back in that direction, and to test for reading learning differences, right, around dyslexia and some other just learning differences that you really are going to have that type of instruction. So that's a huge, we'd always been down there saying, hey, 2/3 of kids can't read on grade level. Well, it turns out like a huge portion of that is probably kids with dyslexia that are not being taught in a way that they're ever going to learn to read if you're not getting into a sort of phonics-based system, which you'll also hear referred to as science of reading. So anyway, we've got the intent. However, as discussed earlier, funding can be hard.
Okay.
So this bill is kind of the next step to try to place a reading coach in every elementary, K through 3 elementary, because we've got teachers need support. A lot of them, it's like a retraining. So having that has been shown to be successful in some other states that are ahead of us in this work. So this is a priority for the House.
Understood.
That's great, because in talking about education in general, what I have witnessed is one of the biggest drivers of parents moving their kids from public school to private school is the lack of support for dyslexia.
Right, that's right.
And that specialized kind of learning.
That's right.
And if we can again improve our public education system to address those needs, we could stop that bleeding out of public schools.
I agree.
Well, on the subject of education for our audience, what is QBE? What do those initials stand for? And tell me how you think that system should be reformed.
Right. So QBE is Quality Basic Education, and it is the 40-year-old plus funding formula for the amount of money that the state sends to the locals for each child enrolled in the public schools. And so you can tell right away when I say it's 40 years old, or more, it's like it doesn't account for any technology.
No.
Importantly, because we don't have time to get through all the problems with it, it also does not have any weight for kids that are coming from impoverished backgrounds or schools that really, because it's real concentrated when you look at who's showing up at what schools. Certain schools just end up with a much higher rate of kids coming from low-income communities, and their need is just greater. The need of the kids is greater. The capacity of the parents to do things like be really involved in the PTA, support the teachers, hold the bake sale is a lot less, right? I mean, and so anyway, for all those reasons, you just the hard truth is you've got to spend more to be able to educate kids who may come in with having heard a lot fewer words, having been in a toxic stress environment. Some families are sleeping in the car. There's just all those things. They need more support. They need more support, and more support costs more money. So we do need to account for that. and that is also not accounted for in the QBE.
Understood.
Yeah.
So moving on to healthcare, since that's another big part of our state budget. I understand SB 481 requires Medicare to cover heart and lung transplants.
Yes.
What was the origination of that bill?
Yeah, so I filed that bill this year. The origination of it was a constituent, young, gorgeous mom, she's like 32 or something, had been a heart transplant recipient. And she wanted to honor the doctors at Emory in the transplant, what is the word I'm looking for, y'all? Those who do, heart and lung transplants. And we did a resolution, through the state Senate to honor them. And at that time, I went to Emory Hospital and heard more of the stories of patients who are transplant recipients. And some of the main doctors who were being honored that day told me that we're the only state that actually has facilities that do heart and lung transplants. Ours are Emory and Piedmont. That do not allow Medicaid to cover them.
Like nationwide?
Correct. There are 2 other states where Medicaid does not cover them, but neither of those states have the facilities to actually do the surgeries.
Right.
So in some ways, we're the only one. And as it was shared by this doctor, who's incredibly passionate about it, the thing is, there are things they can do for the Medicaid patients once their heart is failing, but they have to get to where they're almost dying, first of all. And then what they end up having to do is so costly because they're an inpatient for a long time.
Yeah.
Essentially, it ends up costing more than if they could be a recipient.
So how does that work? Okay, so say I live in New Jersey, or let's say Iowa, and I have to come to Georgia for this transplant. Does my Medicare care about where I live? Or does it care about where I'm getting the treatment?
Right. So with Medicaid, it is a joint federal state. So the states do have, as you know, we haven't expanded Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act still, right? All these years later. So states do have a significant role. So I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that it probably varies by state. And then ours doesn't cover this. So it doesn't matter if you're in Georgia or any other state.
Yeah.
Some other states may say you can have this done out of state, or they may not.
Okay. And then when we were talking about Medicaid and Medicare expansion, is that something that would is that something that would be covered if this were expanded when we talk about?
It would still require
specific legislation.
Action at the state level. So it doesn't necessarily require legislation, although obviously that's sort of the best and more permanent way to get this done. You can also do it through, rules and regs in our agencies and critically, money in the budget. So right now, the coalition of Emory, the Medical Association of Georgia, and Piedmont are working to try to get $1.5 million in the budget, which is not a lot, but is enough to do a few, and then that would also allow us to draw down a federal match of another $1.5 million as a starting place.
Okay, so what's the status of SB 481?
It's sitting there. I mean, I know that if this happens this year, it will probably be more likely to be that budgetary process. I wanted to file the bill as well, because if I can get a hearing, which I'm working on, it would allow for a more thorough airing of the issue than the appropriations process does, and more folks to be educated about why we should just be covering these under Medicaid. And, I was incredibly touched by this young transplant recipient, and I think more people need to hear her story.
Yeah.
And that of the other, Now they, of course, everyone at the recognition, they have a support group, transplant support group, because these things are obviously very significant life events. And of course, all of them had private insurance.
Yeah.
But to just look at this young mom and realize there are others in that position that wouldn't be is really, really touches you.
Yeah. Okay, so while we're on the subject of healthcare, what is the Georgia Pathways program?
So that is Governor Kemp's little tiny Medicaid expansion.
Okay.
But the problem is that the program put into place so much paperwork and hurdles that very few of the people who are technically eligible have actually been able to qualify. So it also put into place like a work requirement too. But that might not even be the biggest impediment. The constant uploading of this or that and the other is not seamless either, and has caused a lot of people to have struggled to get through. So only about 5,000 or 6,000 people have gotten it, and we've got a Medicaid eligible population under expansion of like 400,000 to 500,000, and it's actually going up because the ACA subsidies, pandemic era subsidies, did not get renewed in DC, which means there's already been well over 200,000 Georgians who have been kicked off.
Yeah.
So I work for a small business.
Yeah.
And we're only 8 years old. A lot of our employees are older, and over the years we've looked at having employee coverage, and it is like crippling to a small business to have any sort of
It totally is.
employee coverage. And so my husband and I have always been on ACA since we started this company. And it was creeping up prior to the pandemic to like $1,600 a month for a family of 4.
Yeah.
And then last year we got the tax subsidy, which was incredible. It dropped it down to $794 a month, which was like
Very meaningful.
like Christmas Day. Like I felt like there was hope for us to be able to manage our finances. And then when we went to renew, it was going to be $2,100 a month.
Yep.
And that was just not something that I could. I mean, and that's with a deductible of $26,000.
Wow.
So like, even if something were to happen to us, we're already out over 50 grand.
Yeah.
And
That's right. And your story is unfortunately all too common.
And so we're in month 2 without health insurance.
Oh, Emily. Oh, God.
I know. And my daughter started playing lacrosse. But even that, I'm like, well, ACA didn't cover dental surgery anyway. So if she gets some teeth knocked out, we're out of pocket for that anyway.
Yeah. And this is the death spiral,
Yeah.
right? And this was what the genius of the Affordable Care Act was supposed to be, is that it was going to make everyone have insurance.
Right.
Right? To bring the healthy people in. And then when the individual mandate was not upheld by the Supreme Court, that kind of kicked the rug out under that part of it. And you can see the effects of that as we go on, because the premium increases are just so outrageous. So anyway, Pathways has cost Georgia actually a lot of money. It's like, oh gosh, I don't want to say the wrong thing. It's like 30, 70 million. It's in there somewhere, and 130 million, something like that. And has insured very few people. 60 to 65% of the money is all just gone to the sort of like administrative paperwork side.
Yeah.
I think it's like Deloitte, basically.
Yeah.
That's a scandal.
Yeah.
That is money that all of us are paying to try to get health care for our fellow citizens, and instead all the money's gone to Deloitte.
Yeah.
Crazy.
I mean, at this
Crazy.
point, self-pay.
Crazy.
Self-pay.
Wow.
So
that's scary.
we'll diverge a little bit, talk about a couple other bills. So Senate Bill 43 has to do with ICE. It required ICE agents to wear body cameras.
Yeah.
What was the intent?
Right.
What is the status?
So I filed that piece of legislation in the wake of the murders of Alex Preddy and Renee Good. And the intent is that ICE agents wearing body cameras, which, by the way, they were for a little bit, because Biden signed an executive order saying that essentially federal law enforcement could or should. Got rolled back when Trump came in. It's accountability, it's prevention, right? Because the hope would be that because you're wearing a body camera, you're going to be a little less likely to be like rash and go rogue, right? Even, it might be a little bit of an impulse control check or whatever, And then it's accountability if you do violate the protocols and standards. And it's also protection for law enforcement that they can show what happened. So there's that. So it works both ways in terms of accountability and protection. And it also just helps rebuild some public trust. Sure. And it can inform, the data gathered from it can also inform best practices that can be rolled forward as a policy matter. And so I think it's honestly, it's kind of a win-win, and it should get done.
And what's the status?
There's all of our ICE bills are just wasting away. We think that politically there's not really a path forward for them right now, given the political situation around the administration's immigration crackdown. So, I mean, and in fairness, you know, it may be that there has to be some leeway at the federal level since they are federal
Yeah.
agents, not state agents.
So you alluded to the tragedies in Minnesota. If I could get you to expound a little bit on your overall impressions of ICE, how they're operating nationally, and as a corollary question, do you fall in the abolish ICE
Right.
camp
Great question.
or the reform ICE camp?
Great question. I think that the Biden administration, and there's not a lot written on this. I don't exactly know what they were thinking, but they overreached and mismanaged the border. I don't know why. I don't know if it was overreach or they just some reports are like it just wasn't a top priority for the president. But they let it get out of hand. And Americans do actually want. They understand we've got a really long border, but they do want, you know, to the extent possible, a secure border. However, now the Trump administration has totally overreached and are murdering Americans in the street, you know, and so that is also an occupying, right? There's like an occupation of Minneapolis or, you know, name your city, and Americans also, by and large, don't want that, and they also don't actually want, you know, grannies who have been here for 40 years and own small businesses being shipped off either. That's a different matter, the grannies, you know, because, you know, I guess the folks don't have documents. People wanted to secure the border. They want to feel like we've got some control over our immigration system. This is not what they want. So, you know, I feel like we, of course, my perspective is we do need a functioning immigration system, and any country that is a country has got to be able to control its borders and know who's within its borders to the extent humanly possible, and also have some rational way of processing the applications of those that want to come here. You can't take the whole world. And so I am for a secure border. I'm for an updated immigration system that takes account of the modern lay of the land. That has been impossible to do in Congress over the last 20 years or so. We can always hold out hope, but I am not for the abuses, right? The human rights abuses that we see, and I think that's probably the position of most Americans.
Yeah.
Understood.
Yeah, I 2-3 years ago I sat on a federal grand jury, and it was fascinating.
Wow.
And so many of the cases were illegal immigrants who had gotten caught up because they broke some law and were getting deported, or drug smuggling or human trafficking. And it really was eye-opening to me just how bad the problem was, that even in our state, that wasn't necessarily getting reported on, right? So like we can sit in our little Decatur bubble and say, that's not a problem, but really it had ballooned into a real issue.
And it's long been, especially during this most recent era, like a real strain on Texas and Arizona, these other border states.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was really gross, but total brilliant political move of Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, to ship people to other cities. You know what? And it got the message across. It was
did.
like,
It did.
this is what we're dealing with. And
It did.
I kind of have to hand it to him.
Yeah.
Like,
It
at the
did.
time, I was like, this is awful. But you know what? That is what they deal with.
It was effective.
And you know, people probably did need to understand
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
it's not
100%.
that, and that it isn't fair for Texas and Arizona to have to handle that
Yeah.
all on their own.
Right, right. Okay, so one of the other topics that's been all over the news for various different reasons, whether it be AI or whether it be building local data centers, is the idea of all these data centers being built in our communities. So SB 408 proposes to eliminate the tax cuts for data centers.
Right.
Explain to us like what that goal is and what the current layout of that land is and how this bill would address that issue.
Right. So we passed a bill a few years ago that would have eliminated the tax credit, which has really ballooned into a whole many millions of dollars, like 784 million or something like that this year. And it got vetoed by the governor. So, but as the awareness and controversies about data centers have grown, we've got back. We're back. There are a lot of data center bills. The ones you're referencing, there are bipartisan ones. There's Republican ones, Democratic ones that would eliminate that tax credit. And the main rationale is that, well, there are a couple. Our Department of Audit's analysis showed like 70% would come anyway. And the thing is, the state doesn't get a return. Local governments will, right, on the property taxes if they've gotten a data center. And I will say that those amounts paid by a data center can be large. But we're talking about what the state is handing out to bring them. Yeah. And then the state doesn't get that back. So that means it's sort of like socialized across every Georgia resident, and then the benefits are much more narrowly applied at a county level, right? And if 70% of them would come anyway, because they can't just necessarily go anywhere. Like, they want to be close to places where there's already sort of like power generation and other variety of things. So it just kind of is not a good use of taxpayer money, right? And besides, on top of that, there are a lot of communities don't want them. It's controversial.
100%.
We're grappling with the whole thing. So why are we handing $800 million out the door to bring them here?
Yeah. They don't really employ anybody. So like with the film tax credit, you're looking at a huge workforce that I can see there's an incentive for us to bring people here, job creation, all of that. But with data centers, is there any sort of job creation?
So lots of construction jobs.
Okay.
So a lot of the skilled trades don't like the idea of getting rid of the tax credit because there are good jobs now. I personally don't think they would be as negatively impacted as some of them are afraid. But across the country, that's been a key block, arguing to keep them, and that's on kind of the construction building side. There are not that many jobs once it's up and running. Okay. What there is property tax based on the commercial property space.
Got it. Got it. And then the whole power issue, too, is a whole nother...
Huge. I mean, right now, Georgia Power has gotten approval from the Public Service Commission, which I decry, to essentially like double the grid, like double the amount of power that we have as a state right now, just for data centers, basically. That we don't know if for sure that they're coming, and people definitely don't really necessarily want them.
Yeah.
So,
and then that cost would then, the way that they're positioning it now, the residents of DeKalb County or residents of Georgia would then pay the cost for doubling that power grid?
Now, what they say at the Public Service Commission is that they have a rule in place that is making them pay more. The data center customers, like it's all the big tech companies, right? The richest people in the world, which is another side of this, is that people are a little suspicious of AI. And by the way, they're like, why are we handing out taxpayer money? And why are we having to build all the new power plants when these guys are the ones making all the money off it, right? So they say, the PSC says, hey, we've got this rule that makes them pay for it. But they're fighting tooth and nail against legislation at the Capitol that would say that that's what they have to do.
Okay.
Fighting tooth and nail. So that tells you a few things.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't, what they have doesn't actually cover the entire cost of this massive build out, and they don't want the risk to fall back on them. They want all of us to be available to charge.
Yeah.
Which I don't like.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And they have a bad track record because this is sort of the same thing they did with Plant Vogtle.
Right.
Which is one of the reasons our bills have gone up 6 times in 2 years.
Again, back to the affordability.
Correct.
So
their line is that they've got it all taken care of, but the reality is when you do this amount of building, oh my God, we're gonna be paying for it for 50, 60 years. We'll all be dead and gone. And who knows? We've only been talking about these data centers for like 2 years.
Right.
Musk and Bezos are already talking about putting them in space. So great, we're gonna double the grid. Guess who makes money off that? Not just the tech billionaires. Georgia Power makes a ton of money off that. But they're very much fighting anything that would completely lock into making the tech billionaires pay for it.
So tell me how you generally get along with your Republican colleagues.
The Senate is pretty collegial. There are only 56 of us, so you interact with everybody, and most of them I have a great personal relationship with, and I really like them. I mean, I've got a job I've got to do. They've got a job they've got to do. Sometimes, that makes you annoyed at one another. And I've certainly seen the underbelly of human behavior being in politics. But Yeah, a lot of them I like a whole lot.
Okay.
Yeah, good people.
Now, during the 2020 election, or the fallout of the 2020 election, you got a lot of blowback from the Stop the Steal.
Right.
MAGA,
yeah, they were like,
MAGAverse.
she was stealing the ballots in Pennsylvania. Yeah.
How was that?
It was crazy. I mean, we had to have police in front of our house for 6 weeks around the holidays.
Did you really?
The state patrol was awesome. Yeah. It was cracy. Actually, it's infuriating. In order to even be in this space, you do have to kind of let certain things roll. But the crowd that took over, 4 years ago, is the crowd that fomented the whole Stop the Steal thing and sucked up to Trump and whatnot. And yeah, it is a little bit infuriating that, whatever they thought that would be for a political benefit, because that's what it is, not that they really thought it was stolen. It's a little infuriating to sort of put your governor, your secretary of state, your colleagues, in the firing line.
Do you see any of them on a
Oh yeah, every
regular?
day.
And do
You just have to move past it, because how else do you function?
Yeah.
So speaking of Republicans, what are your impressions of Governor Kemp? You've served in the Senate under his governorship for his entire
Yeah.
2 terms. Give me your impressions of him.
Yeah, so I think he's a smart political, he's smart at maneuvering politically. He sort of has firm ideas about what he wants to do. And he's not really and he's going to be very stubborn about getting those things done. He's not a big, let's transform lots of things type of governor. As you can probably tell by the fact that we built up the surplus and we're not really doing anything with it that would really be transformative. He's been very focused on, business development. I mean, that's kind of in his sweet spot. I do think that he really believes, that the business development is a huge priority, that will improve the quality of life for Georgians, and that he's really just kind of in general a limited government guy. Even right where he's had no interest in the literacy stuff, which I'm like, can you imagine being governor and 2/3 of the kids can't read, and you're just like, whatever, not my thing.
Very different from Deal.
Very different deal. Very different from Deal. Both, but one of the great things about Governor Kemp is, this part of him that does make him sort of a bit focused and also quite stubborn. It served us quite well when Trump was, spending a lot of time trying to knock him down.
Without question.
Yeah, and
Without
so
question.
so I have respect,
Yeah,
right? I have respect for Kemp. I have respect for Brad Raffensperger. I have respect for Jeff Duncan.
Yeah,
Because they
stood
didn't
up for us.
behave like
Right.
some of my colleagues.
They stood up for our state.
That's right.
So-
Now, of course, Raffensperger and Kemp had less room to maneuver. They
Right.
actually were the ones who had real things that they had to do.
Right.
My colleagues in the Senate didn't really.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
There was no actual responsibility on their
Yeah.
shoulders. But Kemp did the right thing, and so did Brad Raffensperger when push came to shove, and that matters. That really matters.
So we'll diverge into things a little more political. We got a governor's race coming up
Yes.
this year. So
exciting.
we're wondering if you've identified a candidate in the primary that you're supporting, and if so, why?
Yes, so I am backing my former colleague, Jason Estevez. I think Jason would be a terrific candidate for the general election. He's a small business owner. He's a lawyer. Great family man. Very smart. Jason is also, I think his instincts are good on policy, having worked with him. We share an outlook. I think we're both really at heart, we're both pretty moderate, and so I think that he would be able to very well maneuver at the state capitol to get an agenda done. He's not a bomb thrower. He's not a beat your chest kind of, let's say the most extreme thing. That's really not him. He is interested in policy, and he is willing to distance himself from his own side when they either are wrong or are just sort of articulating something that is going to be such a political loser that, so I just think he gets it, and I think his personality also would serve him quite well. He's got an even temperament. So yeah, I mean, there's not a quality that Jason has that I think wouldn't serve him quite well as our governor. Of course, he doesn't have the name recognition already as some of the other candidates in the primary, so that's really his challenge. I think in the general election, could he get the nomination? He would do quite well, but getting through the primary is another matter. And I'm rooting for him, but time will tell, right? But I'm gonna do all I can to support him.
Yeah. So what do you think of the Democratic Party's chances in Georgia this year?
I mean, I think we have a real shot. It depends on who the Republicans nominate. Yeah. It depends on what the political landscape is nationally, and it depends on who we nominate. So there's definitely a shot, but as with most political campaigns, a lot is out of your control if you're one of the candidates.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I do think that Estevez would have a good shot of winning a general. And I can't say I feel the same way about all of the other individuals running for governor on the Democratic side. Although I'm glad that we have a spirited primary.
Yeah. What's your take on the Democratic Party nationally?
I think they're doing a decent job. I think it's hard. I feel like not enough Democrats really were willing to let it sink in that self-reflection is needed after you get beat by someone like Donald Trump. Like, your brand is so hated and so toxic that this man, and there are other things you can point to, but there's a whole lot of people that just, they either didn't want to, they just, some people in the base, in the activist base, I think they would rather be right than win, or whatever it is. Or they'd rather be a loud, important voice in a losing coalition than be a less important part of a winning coalition. Whatever it is, I just, some are, frankly, I think misinformed. They believe that the more extreme you are, the more you might motivate people who are infrequent voters. That is not true. If it's maybe it's true here and there, it is not generally true. That is never the way to build a campaign. People could point and be like, isn't that what Trump did? He did to a certain extent. The problem is our coalition is so vastly different than that coalition.
Right.
He went after the biggest demographic group in the entire country, and we're busy stitching together a whole lot of people that share certain things, but not all things. So that was a sort of genius move by Trump. I admit that he was able to expand the base, but he also did it, by the way, by tossing out certain orthodoxies of the Republican Party. Being like, we are not touching Social Security. We are not touching Medicare.
Without question.
Right. And our people, they don't want to do that. They don't want to toss out any Democratic orthodoxies.
Yeah.
Even so. Like, it's like, sometimes I see where folks, colleagues of mine, they like certain Republicans that will stand up to X and Z interest, but then they never feel like we should have to do that too. And I don't really understand that.
I think, Senator, I think your assessment is on target.
Yeah.
I think you summed it up nicely. Some people would rather be a bigger fish in a smaller pond and have a louder voice. But I've always held the belief that political parties exist for one purpose, and that's to win elections.
That's you nailed it.
Period, end of story.
You nailed it.
And to the self-reflection piece, I couldn't agree with you more. For all the complaining about Donald Trump's excesses, which are legion, that's the guy we lost to.
Right. And you can't pretend anymore that it was because people didn't really know what they were getting,
They knew what they were getting.
or he didn't win the popular vote.
Believe me, I've seen signs up in North Georgia. We know he's a felon. We know he's a this.
And they
we know
didn't
he's
care.
a that. We won't vote for him.
And we can unpack that on two other episodes because I have a lot of thoughts on that. But your point, Steve, I'm so glad you made that. Like, there's so many groups at the Capitol that lobby us on everything, and they're very well-meaning, and they're from the left side of the aisle. But let me tell you, their job is not to win elections.
That's right.
Nope.
And too many of my colleagues, especially with the pace down there and the fact that we're in the minority, just default immediately to, well, blah, blah group said, and it's like that we have to think about how do you win. And they don't, and they shouldn't. And it's our job to be like, that's great, you do your job, but we need to do ours. And instead you get, you get assaulted.
That's right, 100%.
By certain followers of different activist groups for saying like, you know what, we got to be able to win.
Yeah, absolutely.
They don't get it. They don't care.
That's a great segue to the next thing I wanted to get into with you, because I know you got into a little hot water. I think it was last year, maybe, or the year before, regarding a position that you took on access to gender-affirming care in the
Well,
prisons?
yes, it was surgeries, yeah.
Okay, explain that and what happened and what kind of the fallout was.
So everyone recalls the commercials that played ad nauseum from when Kamala had been pushed by, I think, the ACLU to, when she's trying to win the primary in 2019, very different environment, or 2020, whatever, very different political environment than we were in 2024, to say that taxpayers should provide gender-affirming sex change surgeries for prisoner inmates and also illegal immigrants. And I can't remember if the illegal immigrants were going to be prisoners or not. But that ad ran ad nauseum, and the first time I saw it, I was like, that is completely toxic, because I knew how it would hit the ears of just like a regular person who wasn't firmly committed to one side or another. They would be like, I'm sorry, I can barely pay my rent and I can't afford healthcare anymore, and you want us to pay for sex change surgeries for prisoners?
Right.
What? It just is so out of touch with what voters are interested in.
Yeah.
And that's not to throw those folks under the bus, because they are important. And the thing is that the Democratic Party is so used to reflexively standing up on behalf of the marginalized and the oppressed.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And that's what this is. That we get away from thinking like, guys, there's still a limited amount of taxpayer money.
Right.
And when folks hear, when we are in the biggest wealth gap, in fact, biggest ever, even bigger than the Gilded Age. That's how big our income inequality is. That Democrats are so, what they took away from it was Democrats care a lot more about abortion and a lot more about rights for LGBT folks than they do about whether I have a job. That's what they took away from it. And you can say they shouldn't have, but that was the message being sent.
That was the message being
And
sent.
that's part of why the brand is toxic. And, so this bill came up, and in my district, I can very much articulate why I should vote against that bill, because there are issues with it, of course, and that's what I would have done for all prior 11 years in the Senate. But part of my job, too, is I'm caucus chair, and we need to win elections. And we need to win elections in places like North Fulton and Woodstock. And no, that makes you look so
out of touch.
Right. That just and doing it on behalf of this very small but very, very loud group of folks. I totally understand where they're coming from.
Me too.
But it hits right into your job is this. My job is to win elections.
Right. Well, that kind of compassion is one of the reasons I'm a Democrat.
Yeah.
Supporting the least of these. I think we
too.
all agree on that.
Yeah.
But again, a political party's job is to win elections.
And if you can't do that, then what are you even doing?
Exactly.
And so the point I made to folks, and I really cast that vote more as caucus chair, to sort of like stand up for the entire brand of the Democratic Party versus like my own
Understood. Well,
district. I felt like I could do that.
Yeah.
It's just like, look, so what you're saying is you want us to adopt and loudly champion issues that are so toxic for even Democrats, right? Democrats were not for this. The polling showed it's like 20% of Democrats are even interested in that. That puts us at such a disadvantage in elections that we can't win, that all that will happen is we're going to keep getting more and more bills targeting transgender folks. Whereas if we could win,
Right.
but I got to tell you, deaf ears for a lot of people.
Yeah,
They just are so
Well, and the amount of
so
people this
committed to their
applies to
viewpoint.
is so
I know.
minute.
You can't spend that. It takes 50+1 to win an election. I'm not saying our system's perfect. I'm not saying it's the right system, but it's a system that we got to play within. And when you can't win without 50% +1, we are supposed to be somewhat reflective of public opinion. It is not my fault, folks, that this is where the public is right now. You're not going to get anywhere if your strategy to increasing rights for transgender folks who are marginalized and have been marginalized and attacked. Democrats don't want that, by the way, is to berate Democrats and enforce some kind of
Purity test.
Yeah. What does that get you? What's the goal?
Absolutely
What's your
nothing.
goal? And a lot of them just still.
Well, I have a motto that
Don't
I don't say out loud a lot, but I'll probably write about it at some point, which is the purists ruin everything. So because it's not about I get that, But, you know, who among us is pure? Let's start with that. Nobody. We're all flawed human beings. And holding fellow Democrats to these litmus tests and then berating them when they don't jump through these litmus test hoops.
That's exactly
when
right.
Our jobs, when I was an elected official, is to try to win so
That's right.
we can advance the policies that are going to help what you're trying to do.
Correct.
It's inexplicable to me, but I won't.
Me too.
I won't.
And
go
you know
any
what? It's
further
fine.
down that
It's
path.
totally fine. I understand that for some people, they just don't care. Like that, you know, that is where they are. And if I can't be there, then, I mean, I guess maybe they don't care. Like I would try, a couple people, I'd be like, well, you know, I am able to do X, Y, Z down there and work on behalf of a lot of good cause. You know, I just think, you know, they just can't do it. And I get that. But for a lot of other folks, it's just sort of like you're in, people are way too much on both sides, are in way too much of a bubble.
No
like
question.
they actually don't get, and that's what frustrates me, because it was sort of Trump winning again that just smacks you upside the head,
Yep, 100%.
right?
Well-
so it's like you gotta be a little more.
And you're like the perfect example when I look at people in the state who've gotten heat from both the right and the left.
Yeah.
And you know, it's like we're stuck in the middle.
It's real hard in our system. The primaries, the donor and activist money, and it pushes both parties that way, and it pushes both of them away from the middle. And guess how you solve any problem? You've got to get to the middle.
Understood.
So is it really a mystery that our government is like gridlocked and
Yep.
incapable of solving all these problems we've been discussing?
So we'll be a little more optimistic with
Okay,
this
good.
next question. In your 12 Senate sessions, what do you regard as your biggest accomplishments? What are you proudest of?
I am proudest for being a strong voice for my constituents and the values that we've been talking about, which are inclusivity and opportunity for all. You know, the way they run things down there is that the majority caucus has all of the carrots and the sticks, unlike DC. Like in DC, the Hakeem Jeffries and his leadership team can give ranking member plum committee assignments to their caucus. That's a tool to get them to stick with the team. We don't have that. And a long time ago, so what they'll do is it'll be kind of like really transactional, like sort of like, well, we'll let you pass that bill or do this favor for you, but only if you kind of do what we want in other ways. And pretty early on, I was like, that's not worth it. That's not what my constituents want. They want me to be able to be a strong voice and not be captured and have to be silent because I'm trying to pass some bill that really ain't going to do anything. Because, by the way, the bills that they let people like that pass don't really do anything. So, you know, I mean, and it's a decision tree, honestly. And I was just like, I'm not going to be quiet when it matters. And I've got to do this work, and I've got to do this work on behalf of not just my constituents, but also every Democrat in Georgia. And, you know, I'm proud of the work that I've done, along with some other really talented colleagues. I have to mention Leader Harold Jones, one of my dear friends in the Senate, to get our caucus into the position that we are now, because it is light years from when he and I both came in together in 2015. So that positions us to be able to take a majority. Right? We have you know, the candidate recruitment, the fundraising, the political positioning, the message, the communications is all so vastly different than it was. And that's really where I could have influence, you guys. I've been in the minority the whole time.
Yeah.
Right? I can't just run around passing bills. And if I did, I mean, no one can. No Democrat can. They pass very few.
Yeah.
And like I said, the number of them that are going to be really transformational is small. Now, I have been able to be really effective on some early learning bills, on some bills dealing with dual enrollment and accessibility and affordability there. But what I do is I just partner with a Republican and I like put my language in their bill. You can get a lot done that way. I've passed a number of bills. If you don't care about, oh, my name has to be on it, you know, because they don't really like doing that, like I said. But you can get stuff done, and not on something that's like going to be really partisan or have some huge budgetary impact, but like a lot of things that I've cared about where I wanted to advance educational opportunity.
Yeah.
I've been able to work.
That's good.
Yeah, it won't be. You won't see that my name passed it, but I will. And I've got some things I'm working on this session too.
All right.
Yeah.
What about disappointments? Any disappointments that stand out?
I mean, you just become more cynical. Like, it's amazing to me how little I knew when I first got elected to the House in 2010. I didn't understand that there wasn't like a sort of like actual consideration of every bill filed. You know, I thought you had more of an opportunity to like propose an idea and that it would like be considered by everybody fairly. No. I've learned a lot about the politics of power. I've learned a lot about the incentives that are very real for me, my colleagues, all of us, where there's just a lot of industry capture, right, of lawmakers. And it's not like I didn't know that was an issue, but in order to even be in this game, you have to raise millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And Americans know what that means. That's why, and the thing is, as Democrats, we have a bigger problem with it. Because we think, oh, but we want to stand up on behalf of the common man. And the American people are like, no, we get it. You have to take big checks from the same. And so I feel like it hurts us more, you know, in some ways, because it's a different self-conception than what we want to have. But it really just perverts the whole system. And that's not the only thing. But so, you know, really getting up close with a lot of that has made me more interested than I ever would have been in sort of like reforms to the things that I see that have really moved our system in this modern era away from like the will of the voters.
Yeah.
Right? And especially the voters in like the broad 60 to 70%. It's either driven by like the extremes in both parties, or it's like kind of driven by like the people who can afford to hire a lot of people and be at the Capitol.
Yeah.
And companies and stuff. And so none of that is how it's actually supposed to be. You can never get rid of all of that, but I do think that due to some changes in the last 20, 30 years, things have gotten a lot worse.
Yeah.
And I do think Americans are fed up. I think they understand, and they're not wrong. And that's why they keep throwing bombs, like trying to elect Donald Trump,
Yeah.
hoping that he would do right by them. Yeah, well, we knew that wasn't going to happen.
So do you have any future political aspirations or?
That's a great question. You know, we'll see. The boys are still kind of like my top priority. I mean, the thing is, both of you know how time-consuming campaigns are, right? Yeah. And so that's always been something I've struggled with. I've done 3 while I've been a mom. And the boys are just at a sensitive age because they're, you know, 9th and 7th. And I can't, you know, my colleagues running statewide right now, I'm like, I mean, it's a year away from your family.
Yeah.
I just can't. I don't want that for my boys.
So
you
maybe-
know? So I
maybe-
just can't see myself doing it while they're still
So maybe
young.
when they're a little older.
We'll see. Yes, we'll see. Maybe.
I like that answer.
Yes, but yeah, I'm not leaving them for a year right now.
So do
I only
you-
got a few more.
I know. That's how I feel too. That's exactly how, I mean, I
Yeah.
like had an aha moment a couple years ago.
Yep.
Like, I can't get this time back.
That's right. That's right.
Do you think you could win statewide?
I do. I mean, I think I'm also pretty clear-eyed about like when I would have a good chance and when I wouldn't. You know,
Yeah.
if anything, I'm probably a little too willing to think that I would not be able to win. You know, and almost risk averse.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'm probably more risk averse than, you know, probably more so than I even should be. But yeah, I wouldn't. I'm just not the type who's gonna like just like go spend a year doing something that I'm definitely gonna leave. Like, what's the point?
Yeah.
And sometimes people do that for another reason besides winning. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But for me, it would be like
Not
because I wanted the job. Plus, I have to want the job.
Yeah.
Like there aren't. I don't want all the.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't want all the jobs. Like I don't really want to be the, you know, state school superintendent.
Right.
You know, I mean, so running for just something that doesn't match up with like my interests and what I think I could accomplish is also not of strong interest.
Yeah. Awesome. So, who are your political heroes?
Oh gosh, that's a hard one. Well, I've got some modern political heroes.
Okay.
Like I have like real ones that have been inspiring all
Yeah.
the way. So first of all, Jimmy Carter is an incredibly inspiring. I just think like some politicians where you're like, their moral compass is just dead to rights, you know, because a lot of people don't have a good moral compass in politics. And I do think that he, you know, solidly did. So he's certainly very inspiring. I mean, you know, women that have broken barriers have obviously been inspiring, and you know, in the face of a lot of glass ceiling, right? That's been inspiring, you know, for Geraldine Ferraro and Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris and all the rest. But right now, I'm really into the people that I think get it in terms of you have to be able to win an election, because it takes political courage to stand up to your own side.
Yeah.
It's very hard. Very hard. Everything is set up for the path of least resistance. So I'm fascinated by people who have been able to win where Democrats have not typically, and are pretty unapologetic about being like, no, I'm not. I'm going to have to tell these people no. And so Ruben Gallego is one of those figures. He's the Arizona senator who won when Trump won Arizona. Ruben Gallego won. I think he's very smart. I think he gets it, and I definitely have fangirled his career to a certain extent because I think we need more voices like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also a big fan of newly minted Virginia Governor Abigail Spanberger.
Yeah.
Now, of course, we have a lot in common because I'm from Virginia and we both went to UVA, so it's probably partially that I think she's awesome. But she also flipped a Trump seat, the one Eric Cantor used to have in the suburbs of Richmond, more than suburbs. I mean, it also was like exurbs. And she's also called the party to task. It was on Defund the Police, where she was like, stop it. Like, we can never win with you people. And she's in a majority maker district. So I also like her because it's like, she's also like, and not everyone has to do that. Like, some people are in these like crazy blue districts and that voice needs representation too.
Right.
But like, the whole caucus should not be in the squad.
Yeah.
Right? You need, because those aren't where you need to win.
Yeah.
You're going to win those seats. Right? Anyway.
Well, I love that she was the Democratic response last night.
Yep. She's awesome.
She did a great job.
She's awesome.
So we'll turn to the personal a little bit. We know you're a lawyer.
Yeah.
You got your law degree at the University of Virginia. So tell us a little bit about your law background and your law career.
Yeah, so I practiced law pretty exclusively for 7-8 years, but my real passion in going to law school was actually public policy and just kind of how the law intersects with public policy. So I have practiced law on and off over the last number of years. After I became caucus chair, the campaigns side and off session portfolio just was really a lot. And with the kids and my husband working all the time, I haven't done that much recently. I mean, I've done a lot of securities litigation. If I went back to straight practicing law, I think I would rather do things where I really did get to be like a champion of those whose voices aren't heard that much. And I did get to do some cases like that even when I was with a big law firm, and they were always the ones that I was kind of the most excited about.
Okay,
I mean, I'd always
understood.
win, but you know, I mean, at least you're in a lane and a space that it's a lot easier for most people to get the big paycheck from all the, industries that have tons of money.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, you brought up your family, so tell us more about your family.
So my older son, Brooks, is a freshman and is actually 16 today, so he's a little bit of an older freshman. And then Reed is in 7th grade, and he turned 13, and they're very busy. Brooks does ultimate frisbee and made the varsity team as a freshman. Reed is doing baseball still, and Brooks swims. Reed does tennis. So having a high schooler is different for me because the amount of like workload for him is different. And it's not the type of thing, and it's like homework, but also just everything, right? All the activities, the social atmosphere is different. And it's not just like, oh, he can't drive. He can't yet, but like certain things in managing all that is not something you can like outsource to like a babysitter. It's like got to be you, and I want it to be me.
And I want it to be me too.
Exactly.
It's that time in the car.
Yep.
Is when they open up to me about stuff.
That's awesome.
And,
yeah.
and you know, I can't replace that time.
I totally agree. Yeah.
I mean, do I want to be driving them at 11 o'clock at night?
Right.
No. We've become comfortable with some Uber teen here and there.
Oh, good. I may be asking you about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that time is priceless.
Right. And so, you know, I probably wouldn't have believed it when they were little, when someone was like, it's actually more time when they're older. It's totally different, obviously, but it really is. Like, it is something you cannot outsource, nor do I want to.
Right.
Whereas when they're 2 or 3, it's not that hard for someone else to give them dinner and like put them to bed.
Yeah, and they don't care.
I mean, they don't really.
They won't remember.
Right, but now, no. If you're not there, you need to
know.
be. I heard it referred to as like a potted plant for your kid, because they need you. It may not be that they're always opening up to you, but the point is that you are there, and you're then that foundation for everything for them to be able to like move into this next phase. And so I feel like now being present in actual evenings and hours and all that matters more than it did.
Yeah.
Which is one of the reasons that I feel like a campaign right now is not a statewide campaign would not be conducive.
Not for an Uber driver.
That's right. But no, happily married. My husband has been, you know, extremely supportive. I could never have done this career, obviously, without him because it has not paid the bills. So I always, you know, want to give him that gratitude as well.
Yeah. All right. So Steve and I have this ongoing conversation about our favorite movies, and I have to interject here. We did watch as a family The Godfather the other night.
Oh, okay.
My husband had never seen it either.
Oh, okay.
And now it's like moved up to like the top of everybody's list.
Okay, good.
Of, you know, classic cinema.
All right.
Anyway,
good.
so what is your favorite movie?
Oh my gosh, you would ask me that. I mean, so I don't know. How can anyone pick just one? Like, I like whenever I get questions like that about book or movie, I'm like, what do you mean?
Name a couple.
Okay. Well, I like, you know, they're just the classics that will always pull me back. Like, it's like that, like where I was when I first saw them, kind of. So like, The Natural and 16 Candles.
Yeah.
I love Overboard.
Oh wow.
Yes.
Overboard.
Oh my God.
With Kurt Russell. You talking about the Kurt Russell movie Overboard? Or
Yes,
okay.
I am.
Oh my goodness.
Well,
All
because
right.
there's just so many quotable good
Okay.
ones. So we watched Major League with the boys. I mean,
Major League's pretty
League,
funny.
so good. You know, I just love, you know, all these movies. But you know, I'm much more of a book person than a movie person, even so. But again, like picking a favorite book would be like impossible.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite author?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I have a lot that I like, but
Yeah.
All right, so I've got a corollary
Yeah.
question. You mentioned your husband and don't want to get you in any trouble with him, but are there any celebrity crushes that you want to
yes, Jake
share?
Ryan from 16 Candles.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
In fact, we should just rewind this. I only want to say 16 Candles.
Yeah.
It's got so
Thank
many
you.
good lines. And
We were joking because
it has Jake Ryan.
and Jake Bryan. So my daughter's birthday's on Sunday and mine's on Monday. And we have this joke that like now my birthday is kind of chopped liver because because her birthday and she's got her sweet 16 and I'm turning 47 and my brother-in-law was like sweet 47 and I'm like only if Jake Ryan pulls up in a Porsche.
Oh my God, I love that. Yes, I mean, like even watching as an adult, I'm like, oh, he's so
I mean, and he looked like a man back then.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
good.
But that's about the like transporting to like back when I was young and before I was old and married and like just all the drama of young teenage love, right? So some of these movies can just take you back to like just a different phase, you know?
Yeah.
Do
Oh,
I need-
that's
do I
it's
need to get
nostalgia.
Some cold compresses. for
Probably,
you guys?
apparently so.
All right,
I'm like, Jake's
all right,
on. Yeah.
You know, just, all right, didn't mean to stir it up. but-
Swoon.
You're just upset that you don't have anyone like Jake Ryan.
You need Jake Bryan to pull up in a Porsche for you, Steve.
Yeah.
He's not going to do it for me. I'm just going to put that out there. No, not that there's anything wrong with that, but it won't work for me.
You're
Ask Diane about Jake Ryan.
I will. I'm going to ask her. I will ask her about it.
All right. So, what advice would you give to any newcomer who's running for political office?
Yeah. So, look, if you're a newcomer and you've never run before, the actual mechanics of building a campaign are really important.
Yeah.
You know, and understanding like what it will actually take to win. So getting people that can help you know that, right? Maybe it's on the, campaign manager side, maybe it's on the fundraising side, maybe it's on the communication side, or all of the above, depending. But there are a lot of folks that like don't really understand the basics of people have got to see your name 7 times, right? You need that name recognition, and how are you going to get there, right? And they go to the same events with the same 30 people, and like that's not advancing your campaign, right? Once you've done it a few times, and there may be other times when you need to show up at something, but like you don't really need to be at the same civic association meeting unless maybe it's yours every single month. You need to be like knocking on doors so you actually meet new people, right? Or have those interactions. And yard signs in the right of way are not significant at all. They're a big waste of money.
Can you say that again?
The yard signs that are not in someone's yard.
You're 100% right about that.
No one is looking at them. No one also putting them out 8 months before a campaign is also worthless, because no one is looking at them until like 6 weeks before the election.
Well, you said something salient. To pick up on something you said, somebody said this to me early in my campaigning days, that there are people that want you to win, there are people that will help you to win. And those are 2 different things. And you have to be able to discern.
Well, and you got to be savvy about the consultants.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of them, and I don't really blame them, because you can't make a ton of money off, depending on what the campaign is, off any one campaign. So a lot of them like take on like a ton of campaigns, but then you're paying a lot. And it'd be easy. It'd be better to find, have someone in like a consultant role, and then bring in someone who's just kind of young and smart.
Yeah.
And it can work for you.
Right, exactly. So
that's another thing to be wary of. Another thing to be wary of is that, and like I said, I don't really blame them, but if you actually want to run an effective campaign.
Understood.
I wanted somebody to do all my paperwork.
That too. There's so much with the bank account. You got to make sure you incorporate your campaign accounts. That's really important.
100%.
There's legal, there's financial.
Well, in my last campaign, I completely outsourced the disclosure.
I do that now too.
It was so much money this time around.
Yep.
That I'm so grateful I had somebody doing my disclosures.
That is a good recommendation. There are people out there that do them, and you will mess them up, and you will get fined.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's not worth it.
There are too many, and they are too complicated.
Yeah.
And
I did. I got fined.
Oh, I've been fined. Eventually I was finally like, okay. Because like I would like run it, I would be trying to do it myself and then run into some kind of problem when it was, too late for me to like figure it out, and then it went awry, and then if you're late, they then fine you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not worth it.
No.
Well, you've been so generous with your time.
Glad to be here.
As we kind of wind down, is there anything in closing you'd like to
invite me
share
back
with us?
sometime.
Yeah.
Once we're done with all the
After the
Yes.
session.
all the important gubernatorial candidates.
Well,
Maybe once we get past the primary.
Yeah, so, and we know the session's busy for you, Senator, so we're really grateful that you carved out some time to be with us today.
Happy to. It's my honor.
So thank you again so much for sharing your insights with us. It's been fun. I hope it's been informative for our audience, and we really, really do appreciate it. Emily, thank you as always for sharing this foxhole with me. Do you have any closing thoughts that you want to impart for our audience before we depart?
Just thank you so much for being here today. It's always a pleasure to talk to you and get your insights.
You guys as well.
Well, thanks again to the team here at Scottdale Podcast Cafe. We're doing such a great job in supporting us. It's really outstanding. And for our audience, if you have any ideas about possible guests or future topics, please visit our website and drop us a note at servesomebodypodcast.com or via social media. And also note that our episodes are now available on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and YouTube. We understand that time is the most valuable resource that any of us have. So we sincerely thank you for spending some of your precious time giving us a listening ear. We will never take that for granted. These are indeed serious times. So until the next time, just remember, think for yourself and don't fall for the show. Goodbye.
Love it.
Yay!
You're gonna serve somebody in a booth or on the street. You're gonna serve somebody. Every vote, every voice, every tweet might be the Lord, a dollar, or the folks who can't speak loud. You're gonna serve somebody. So say who you're serving now.